On the morning of October 14, 2025, the world of soul music went silent. Not with a scandal, not with a headline, but with a single family statement that said, "The shining star of our family has dimmed his light." Michael D'Angelo Archer, the man the world knew simply as D'Angelo, had taken his last breath in New York City at just 51 years old. And the cruelest part? He had been fighting for his life in silence. No press release, no farewell tour, no goodbye. Just a man, a genius of a man, slipping away quietly, the same way he had always lived. Private, mysterious, misunderstood. And today, we are going to tell you the full story of who he really was, because what they put in the headlines barely scratches the surface of the weight this man carried from the very beginning. It started in Richmond, Virginia, on February 11, 1974, in the South Side neighborhood, one of the toughest parts of a city that did not offer many soft landings. Michael Eugene Archer was born to two Pentecostal ministers, his father, Luther Archer Sr., and his mother, Mary Ann Smith. Church was not just Sunday morning for this family. It was the air they breathed, the language they spoke, the rhythm of every single day. And for young Michael, the church piano became his first love. Before he could even fully reach the keys he was playing. By the time he was a teenager, he was not just playing, he was composing, arranging, hearing music in layers that most adults could not even imagine. The church gave him a gift, but Richmond was also shaping him in harder ways. Poverty, the streets, the weight of being a young black man in a city where your zip code could determine your entire future. He carried both worlds inside him, the sacred and the street. And that tension, that beautiful, painful tension, is exactly what made his music unlike anything the world had ever heard. By the time he was barely out of his teens, D'Angelo had already won a local talent competition at the legendary Apollo Theater in New York City, the same stage that had baptized James Brown, Ella Fitzgerald, and Marvin Gaye into greatness. He won that competition 3 consecutive times. 3 times. The crowd at the Apollo does not give standing ovations out of pity. They give them because they recognize greatness. And they recognized it in this quiet, intense young man from Virginia who sat down at a piano and made people feel things they did not have words for. That performance opened doors. Kadar Massenberg, a music executive who had an eye for rare talent, signed D'Angelo, and in 1995, the world received Brown Sugar. He was only 21 years old. Brown Sugar was not just an album, it was a cultural reset. At a time when hip-hop was dominating black music and R&B was becoming increasingly polished and commercial, D'Angelo walked in with something raw, something rooted, something that sounded like it had been pulled directly from the DNA of Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, and Prince, and yet sounded like nothing any of them had ever made. The title track, Lady, Cruisin', these were not radio songs, they were confessions. The album sold over 1.5 million copies. He was celebrated everywhere. Chaka Khan called him a genius. Prince, one of the most private and selective musicians alive, said openly that he craved D'Angelo's musicianship. George Clinton said he was the worthy successor to Marvin Gaye himself. That is not a small statement. That is a crown being passed down through generations, and D'Angelo wore it. But it was heavier than anyone knew. Because with the fame came something he was not prepared for. The world did not just want his music, they wanted his body, his image, his sexuality. The video for Untitled, How Does It Feel, from his second album, Voodoo, shot in a single take. D'Angelo filmed from the waist up, wearing nothing but a gold crucifix, his body carved like something from another world, became one of the most iconic music videos in R&B history. Voodoo debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 in January 2000, selling over 320,000 copies in its first week alone. But that video haunted him. Everywhere he went, people screamed not for the music, but for the image. And D'Angelo, a deeply spiritual, deeply cerebral artist who cared more about chord progressions than magazine covers, began to feel like a piece of meat on display. He said it himself, he felt reduced, objectified, and for a man whose entire identity was built in the church, in music, in Black artistic tradition, that feeling was corrosive. What followed was a decade that nearly destroyed him. D'Angelo disappeared. Not a clean retirement, a collapse. Depression settled in deep. Then came the alcohol. Then came the drugs. He gained weight, deliberately, some people believe, as if trying to destroy the image that had trapped him. There were DUI arrests, there were rumors of mental breakdowns, there were years where people who had loved him simply did not know if he was alive. The music industry, which had celebrated him so loudly, moved on without even looking back. But those who knew him best knew the truth. This was not laziness. This was not arrogance. This was a man fighting a war inside himself that no Grammy could ever prepare you for. A man who had poured every ounce of his soul into his art, only to have the world reduce him to an image. That kind of wound does not heal quickly. Sometimes it does not heal at all. But then, against all odds, D'Angelo came back. On December 15, 2014, with almost no warning, Black Messiah arrived like a lightning strike. There had been no major rollout, no drawn-out promotion, just music, raw and immediate. And for a moment, the world truly stopped. Critics didn't hesitate. They called it a masterpiece, a bold and necessary statement that felt both timeless and urgent. At the 58th Grammy Awards, it earned Best R&B Album, while Really Love took home Best R&B Song, cementing his return not just as a comeback, but as a triumph. Publications like Rolling Stone would later declare that all three of his albums were contemporary classics. It was a rare achievement, the kind that only comes from an artist who refuses to compromise. D'Angelo had stepped out of the shadows and delivered something transcendent, something that reminded the world why his absence had been felt so deeply. He didn't stop there. Touring globally with the Vanguard, he brought that energy to stages across continents, from Europe to Australia, reconnecting with audiences who had waited over a decade to see him again. Then, in 2018, he reached an entirely new generation through Unshaken, featured in Red Dead Redemption 2. For many players, it was their first introduction to his voice, haunting, soulful, unforgettable. Behind the scenes, the story was still unfolding. Reuniting with longtime collaborator Raphael Saadiq, he quietly worked on a fourth album. Just a year before his passing, Saadiq shared that D'Angelo was in a good place, inspired, energized, and building something new. The comeback wasn't over. The story, it seemed, still had more to say. And then came the silence again, the kind that felt familiar, almost haunting to anyone who had followed D'Angelo's life and career. In early 2025, news broke that he had quietly canceled a scheduled performance at the Roots Picnic in Philadelphia, citing an unforeseen medical delay following surgery. There were no elaborations, no statements, no interviews, just silence. For longtime fans, that silence carried weight. It wasn't just absence, it was a signal that something deeper was unfolding behind the curtain. What no one fully understood at the time was that D'Angelo was in the fight of his life. Away from the spotlight, away from speculation, he had been battling pancreatic cancer, one of the most aggressive and unforgiving forms of the disease. True to the way he had always moved through the world, he chose to face it privately. No public breakdowns, no press tours for sympathy, just quiet resilience. The same man who disappeared for years between albums was now facing mortality with that same sense of control and dignity. For months, he remained in and out of hospitals, enduring treatments that took more from him than they gave back. Still, the details never leaked. Those closest to him honored his wishes, protecting his privacy as fiercely as he had always protected his art. In his final 2 weeks, he was moved into hospice care, where the battle slowed and the reality of the end began to settle in. Then, on the morning of October 14, 2025, in a hospital room in New York City, the music stopped. The loss rippled far beyond the music world, but nowhere was it more devastating than within his own family. He left behind 3 children, his sons Michael Jr. and Morocco, and his daughter Imani. For Michael Jr., the pain was almost unimaginable. Earlier that same year, he had already lost his mother, Angie Stone, D'Angelo's former partner and the woman who inspired Brown Sugar, in a tragic car accident. Within a single year, he lost both parents. It's the kind of grief that defies language, the kind that settles deep and lingers forever. In death, as in life, D'Angelo was surrounded by the roots that shaped him. He was laid to rest at Mount Calvary Cemetery in Richmond, following a powerful celebration of life held at St. Paul's Baptist Church in Henrico, Virginia, on November 1st, 2025. That church wasn't just a venue, it was where everything had begun. It was the place that first handed him a piano, the place where his gift first found a voice, and now it was the place that welcomed him home. The service was filled with music, memory, and reverence. Stevie Wonder delivered a tribute that felt less like a performance and more like a conversation between souls. Members of the Soulquarians, the creative collective that had shaped an era, gathered once more, not in a studio this time, but in mourning. It wasn't just a goodbye to an artist, it was a farewell to a movement, to a sound that had redefined what music could feel like. D'Angelo never embraced labels. He rejected the term neo-soul, insisting instead, "I make black music." That statement wasn't defiance, it was truth. His work carried the weight of history, the pulse of pain, and the beauty of transcendence. From the raw sensuality of Brown Sugar to the spiritual depth of Voodoo and the political urgency of Black Messiah, his music wasn't just heard, it was felt. And somewhere in a studio in New York, an unfinished 4th album still exists. Fragments of thought, echoes of melodies, the final fingerprints of a man who didn't just create music, he created something closer to prayer. Now, with his voice gone, the world feels a little quieter and a lot less soulful.